Hello everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to get started with Frigga. Let's create an empty scene and open it. Create an empty game object, call it generator, and add the Walker generator component to it. You can see that there are many configurable options in the inspector, but we don't need to care about them just yet. Just scroll to the bottom of the component and hit the generate button. As you can see, a level was generated in the scene, and a new game object called generated level was created in the scene hierarchy. Now, if you click the generate button a few more times, you should see different levels being generated. Over the course of using Frigga, you'll probably want to generate many levels, and it would be annoying having to scroll down in the inspector every time you want to generate a new level. This way you can use the Frigga generator overlay that you can access from anywhere. It should be enabled by default, but in case it's not, you can press the overlay shortcut and toggle the visibility of the overlay. When I click the generate button again, a new level is generated. You can see that the generated levels look very basic. What we can see right now is called an integer grid, or int grid for short. It's a very simple representation of a level, and it got its name from the fact that we could as well use integers to represent the layout. But since it's easier to recognize the tiles by colors, we assign a unique color to each int-grid tile. Here, the wall int-grid tile has a dark color, while the floor tile has a lighter color. If we want to make the levels look good, we need to create and apply a theme, which we will focus on next. Right-click in the project view and go to Create Frigga Theme. This will create a theme for you with a reasonable default configuration. First, let's focus on the in-grid tiles section. You can see that there are two tiles prepared for us, a floor tile and a wall tile. What I usually like to do is change the color of the tiles based on the tileset that I'm using, so let's do that. Now let's go back to the generator component. Find the theme field at the top of the inspector and assign the theme file that we just created. Next, we need to tell the generator which tile from the theme it should use for walls and which tile for floors. This time it's easy, because the mapping is one-to-one with the tiles that we created in the previous step. But sometimes it can be different. For example, in one of the sample scenes in the asset, I have tiles called ground and water because I'm generating an island. If we now generate a level, you can see that the colors changed based on the in-grid tiles that we configured in the theme asset. Let's focus on the theme now so that we can add some nice graphics to the level. Inside the inspector, you can see a section called Layers. Layers are used for stacking tiles on top of each other using built-in Unity tile maps and sorting order. My go-to layer structure is one layer for floor tiles, one layer for wall tiles, and one layer for decorations. This is also the structure that is created for you by default when you create a new theme. Now click on the Rules button next to the Floors layer and a new window should open. Each layer consists of rule groups and each rule group is made of rules. Let's create a rule group now and add our first rule. Now click on the left-hand square and a rule editor window should open. I know that there are many new concepts and windows, but it should start making sense very soon. At the top of the window, we choose which tile we want to output for this rule. Since we're inside the floor layer, let's add a floor tile by clicking the Add Tile button. When we do that, the tile appears in the list and also inside the rule group. Now, if you have many tiles in your project, it's often quite hard to find the correct tile with the small preview. Because of that, there are two more ways to select the tile. First, if you open the tile palette window and select the Paint tool, you can click on the tile and then click on the Add from Brush button. Second, you can also drag and drop the tile from the project view. If you want to remove a tile from the rule, you can simply right-click on it. In the bottom half of the window, you can see a rule pattern editor. This is where we configure when a rule should be applied. With the floor sprite that we selected, this is very simple as we want to apply the rule whenever there is a floor tile inside the int grid. So we click on the floor int grid tile in the list on the left and then click on the center tile in the pattern. As soon as we do that, our level should get updated to reflect the rule that we added. Let's handle the wall tiles now. Inside the theme editor window, we can use the arrows to cycle through theme layers, so let's select the walls layer now. Again, create a new rule group and then a new rule inside. When you create a new rule, it gets automatically displayed in the rule editor if you have that window open. When setting up a new theme, I usually start with simple rules first and then handle the details later. Let's add the wall tile that will be used when no other rule matches. Again, I select the tile in the tile palette and then click the Add from Brush button. In the rule pattern editor, select the wall in the grid tile and then left-click in the center of the pattern. Now let's move on to actual wall tiles. Create a new rule again and select a wall tile with bricks. We want to apply this rule if the underlying int grid tile is a wall tile and there is a floor tile below. You can see that the new rule was applied at some places instead of the filler solid brown tile that we added earlier. The reason for that is that the rules are evaluated from the top to bottom as they are defined in the layer. And once a rule is applied for a given tile, no other rules can be applied inside that same layer. Let's add a few more wall tiles. This tile set has a corner tile for when there's a floor to the left of a wall. We can leverage the order of rules and add a new rule on top of the list with the desired rule pattern. Repeat the same for the other side. So far, we've only used patterns where only the direct neighbors influence the selected tile. However, this tile set also has this extra layer of bricks on top of each wall tile. If we want to create a rule for this tile, we need to use a slightly bigger pattern, like this. Some tile sets are harder to set up than others, so do not get discouraged if it takes you a while to figure out what the rules and patterns should look like. The process might also include you going back and forth tweaking several rules until everything works perfectly together. Now let's speed up the video while I add the rest of the wall tiles. The walls now look mostly good, but we can see some areas of the level that are incorrect. The problem is that the tileset needs at least 3 vertical tiles for walls, but here we only have 2 tiles, which leads to visual issues. To fix this, we need to go back to the wall generator component and look for the wall size property. Let's increase the vertical size to 3 and generate a new level. You can see that the levels now look good. Let's look into some slightly more advanced theme features now. For example, we might want to add some barrels. First, switch to the decorations layer, create a new rule and add the barrel tile. I want the barrel to appear in corners like this. But what if we want to have the barrels in all 4 variants of a corner? We can, of course, create 3 more rules and slightly modify the pattern each time. I'm using the duplicate right-click action here to make it quicker. But there is a simpler way, so let's remove the last 3 rules and make it better. You might have noticed that there are some extra buttons for each rule in a rule group. For the barrel rule, we could use one of the Reflect X, Reflect Y or Rotate buttons. These allow us to transform the rule pattern without the need to create extra rules. Let's click on the Rotate button to match the pattern to all 4 corner variants. We can see that it almost worked. The rule is now applied in all 4 corners, but the barrel is rotated together with the rule. We can fix that by toggling the Lock Transform control, which makes sure that the tile is not rotated together with the pattern. The last thing I want to show you for the barrel is how to change the probability of the rule being applied. By default, each rule is applied whenever possible, but we can change that using the probability control. Let's change the probability to 40%. We can see that some corners are now empty. Let's add some enemies now. I want to show you that it's also possible to use prefabs instead of tiles as an output of a rule. In the rule editor, click the drop-down at the top and choose Game Objects instead of tiles. Next, click the Add Object button and choose the enemy prefab, or you can drag and drop the prefab onto this window section. Finally, configure the rule so that enemies can appear on top of floor tiles. The first issue is obvious, as we now have enemy on top of each floor tile in the level. I've already shown you how to use the probability control, but I also want to show you another way. There is a control which lets you apply blue noise to rules, which we can use to place tiles a specific distance from each other. Let's click on the letter B to open the blue noise settings and click the Enabled checkbox. The default distance is set to 5, so we can see the enemies are now spaced out approximately 5 blocks from each other. We can decrease or increase the distance if we want. You should know that the distance is only approximate. There might be objects that are closer or further away than the specified distance. The last thing I want to demonstrate here is that you can add multiple outputs to a single rule, and the theme engine will pick a random output whenever the rule is applied. This is a good way to quickly add some variety, but you can always create a separate rule if you need more control. There are some more rule controls that I want to show you. Let's demonstrate them on this trap tile. First, there is this Modulo control, which lets you apply the rule every X tiles. Next, there is the Perlin noise control, which lets you apply a rule whenever a Perlin noise value is above a specific threshold. This can be very useful if you want to generate features like forests, or patches, or anything where the randomness should be kind of smooth. There are two parameters controlling the noise. The scale parameter controls the frequency of the noise. When the scale is small, there are larger areas where the rule is applied, and large areas where not. If we increase the scale, we can see that now there are many smaller areas where the noise is applied. The threshold parameter controls how large the underlying noise value must be to apply the rule. With the default value of 50, the rule is applied for approximately 50% of time. If we increase the value, the rule is applied less often, while if we decrease the value, the rule is applied more often. Another thing that I want to show you is the transform control, which lets you move and rotate both tiles and game objects. And finally, you can also disable a rule by clicking the checkbox next to it. You can also do the same for the whole rule group. Another important aspect of working with procedural levels is where to spawn the player. Fortunately, it's quite easy to do with Frigga. Let's open the Walker generator component and scroll down to the spawn and exit section. This section of the generator lets you choose where to place the spawn and or exit point of a level. We will focus on the spawn point here, as that's what we can use to move the player to a desired location. Let's enable the spawn point and go through the options. Place in center controls whether the spawn point is placed in the center of a level or in the corner. Open space controls if there should be floor tiles around the point so that it is not directly next to a wall. The tile option lets us place a specific in-grid tile on the spawn point, and the game object lets us choose which game object we want to place on the spawn point. And finally, the instantiate option controls whether the provided game object should be instantiated or just moved. Now I want to show you how to use the spawn section to place your player after a level is generated. I have a player prefab that I grab into the scene. I will also create a very simple camera setup. Let's add the pixel perfect camera and make the camera a child of the player. Let's head back to the generator component and make sure the spawn point is enabled. I want the player to be in the center of the level, in open space, and I need to assign the player object onto the game object field here. Now it is very important that the instantiate field is unchecked, because the player is already in the scene and I want to just move it instead of creating a clone. If we now generate a level, we should see the player being placed somewhere in the middle of the level. We can also enter play mode, where a new level should be generated for us and we can verify the whole setup. One problem with the current setup is that if we are unlucky, the player can be placed on the same tile as one of our decorations or enemies. The reason for that is that as far as the theme engine is concerned, the tile with the player is still a normal floor tile, so anything can be placed there. Let's open the theme object and create a new in-grid tile and call it spawn. Next, open the floor layer and add a new rule. Use the floor tile and make it apply where there is a spawn in-grid tile below. Finally, go back to the generator component and in the spawn section set the tile to the newly created spawn tile. If we now generate a new level, we should never see the player colliding with a decoration tile. Another feature I want to show you is how to customize the generated levels. For example, if I enter play mode again, you can see that I can walk through walls, so let's fix that. In the scene hierarchy, find the object called generated level and expand the children. There is an object called in-grid, which holds the underlying in-grid representation of the level. Then there is one object for each theme layer. And finally, there is an object called objects, which holds all game objects that do not belong to any theme layer. For example, the spawn or exit objects. When generating a level, the generator reuses the previous level game object, which means that if we make a change, it will be persisted. If you want to add a collider, you just have to find the game object for the walls layer and add all the necessary components to it. Now, if we enter play mode, the player should collide with the walls. You should know that there are some exceptions to what can be customized directly. For example, if you rename some of the child objects, the generator might lose track of them and create new ones. Moreover, grid orientation and other properties must be set inside the theme. If you ever think that you broke something in the generated level object, you can always just delete it and let the generator create a fresh one for you the next time it runs. This is all that I wanted to show you in this getting started video. If you want to see more tutorials and examples, you can find them in the documentation, which is linked in the description.